Thank you for joining the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities monthly informational webinar, Creating and Maintaining On-Campus Residential Options. My name is Drew Andrews. I am the Assistant Director and Technical Assistance Coordinator at the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities. Our presenters today are Katie Norland, Director of the Access Program at the College of the Florida Keys, and Dr. Adam Meyer, Director of the IES Program at the University of Central Florida. And again, this webinar is being recorded. This webinar is a panel discussion. If there are any handouts, they will be placed in the chat window, along with we'll be providing an evaluation link to evaluations, and we'll also be providing phone numbers if you need to call in if you're having difficulty hearing through the Zoom link. And I'll be putting those in just a few minutes. Again, the chat icon is at the bottom of the window of Zoom. I would imagine that we're all pretty much Zoom experts at this point in time after the year that we've had, and we're excited to present this webinar. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Iris Neal, who's going to facilitate the panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So today we're talking about the on-campus residential living opportunities and how they were set up at two of the programs. We'll start with just an overview, and then we'll ask questions about the different programs. And so Katie and then Adam, would you provide an overview of your FPCTP and just how you got it started and when it was started?
Sure. Hi, Katie Norland from the College of the Florida Keys. Project Access actually began in the 2013-2014 academic year, and it was primarily a partnership between the Monroe County School District and the college. They focused on dual enrollment, transition skills, and things like that. And then in 2017, we became an FPCTP, and we started seeing students become interested in housing. Just a couple things to note: we are one point of entry, so our students start in the fall, and we typically were anywhere from, we say, 1 year plus with our program. There's a year one where the students have the opportunity to receive 1 to 2 industry certifications. And then year 2 and beyond is encompassing of a college credit certificate opportunity, where the students can choose a certificate that goes along with their vocational interests. And that can take, again, anywhere between 1 and 2 years, just depending what they choose. And one thing I do need to mention too is we are starting a second program at our new Upper Keys Center in this fall, August 2021. So that's something very exciting for us as well.
That's neat. No. And then, so yeah, hello everyone, Adam Meyer from University of Central Florida. We got a little bit of a later start than Katie. We started in 2015, 2016 was our first year of running IES, Inclusive Education Services, on campus. We've evolved, made a number of changes since its inception. So we're currently a 2-year campus experience, and students get a certificate through our Division of Continuing Education on campus. And they get that certificate in one of 3 concentrations: hospitality, social services, or education. Where we stand today, we have 15 students on campus, and 3 of those individuals live in housing. We have done housing from the outset. When we first started, we had 6 out of 10 students in our first year lived on campus, and then our second year, I'm pretty sure all 17 of the 17 students lived on campus, and we've kind of have trickled downward in percentage of students living on campus relative to the overall group every year since then. And I'm sure we'll probably talk a little bit more about how that came to be as the conversation unfolds.
Okay. So when you were beginning the organization of your program and the housing or the residential options, who were the administrators that you wanted to be sure were on board? And how are you involved in arranging roommates and housing mentors and for the programs or for the housing?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Our housing is very unique where it is on our physical campus, but the College of the Florida Keys doesn't own or operate it. It is owned and operated by a third-party vendor. And so our main involvement is matching our students who are enrolled in Project Access with a residential mentor who will act as a liaison between us and the students in that residential setting, but also, provide some of that guidance that they're learning for the skills that they're learning in class that go along with the independent living. Really, everybody needs to be on board. There have been a lot of changes with our housing over the past years. That's what it currently looks like. At one point, the college did run the dorms. That was before we had a lot of student interest in living independently and taking an opportunity in that. And so right now what we're dealing with is really that interaction between us and a third-party vendor. I'm trying to think. We really can't say a lot about roommates. We do have a good relationship with the dorms, and we request that students in Project Access aren't grouped together. And that there are no more than 2 students in Project Access in one room because they are suite style rooms. So they have their own room, and then there are 4 rooms in each suite.
So for us, when we started, we knew in our vision of IES at the time when we were launching that we wanted housing to be a part of the process. We were lucky, grateful, fortunate that our housing administrators, the executive director at the time, and the key people who we needed to work with were very much on board with students living on campus. I think that was probably benefited from the fact that I'm also the director of the traditional disability office, student accessibility services on campus as well. So I had those contacts and relationships with those individuals through the traditional disability office work that we did. So it was pretty easy to jump in and to have those conversations and to map everything out. They do live on campus. We spent some time identifying the pros and cons of the different complexes that we have on campus, and we identified the one that made the most sense. We picked one that was middle of the road price range wise, so not the least expensive, not the most expensive. We also considered other things that we felt would be important to this group of students. We did spend a lot of time talking about roommates and the pros and cons of a truly inclusive environment of students just being assigned to living with other degree-seeking students versus students living only with those within the IES program. I will say there were some philosophical differences and thoughts among many of us, just different ways in which we thought made the most sense and how we would address that. In the end of the day, we did decide to have the students live with roommates within IES, so they did not live with degree-seeking students. And we also, at the time, in our first year, the complex or the area where they live on campus, a village, and there are sort of like 3 complexes within the village, and we decided to have them all live within one complex within that village. And the reason the thinking there was that it'd be easier because each complex has its own staff leaders, housing staff leaders. So we'd be working with just one group of staff leaders as opposed to a number of different folks. But they were on different floors and they were a little bit spread out within that complex. But we'll talk more about kind of lessons learned as we went through that. We never really, I'd say the first year, the only other thing we did is housing chose to have our RAs, our resident assistants. They offered a select group of them additional hours for compensation, I think 10 hours, 5 to 10 hours a week of time where they would be more in tune, intentionally reaching out to the students, meeting with them, checking on how things are going, helping them with the transition to housing. But we found that it really wasn't needed, or at least it didn't have the overall impact that we thought it would have. So for the most part, we've really just tried to embed them in our housing environment without really doing a lot differently or treating them differently or defining them differently than any other student who lives within our on-campus housing.
So it sounds like it was the executive director of housing, then your connection or your leadership as the DSS or Disability Services director, and then the housing staff and the RAs were who you were working with in setting up the program?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Were there any prerequisite classes or skill checklists that you used with the students and families when you were looking at having the students apply for housing?
Not really for us. Our students do take a lot of courses in their first semester that focus on independent living, successfully transitioning to college. And so the mentors try and play a role in reinforcing a lot of those things that they're learning in the classes. We are very transparent with families when they come to speak with us that our housing is a really 100% independent living opportunity for the students. And that, the mentors are peer mentors. I know we'll talk a little bit more about that later. I have recently developed what I'm calling Parent College, which will be an online orientation of sorts to familiarize parents and potential students of the services that we offer and how we offer them. And it does touch on housing. But again, it's more of just an awareness thing because it's really independent.
Yeah, and for us, like Katie, we also stress the independent living piece of it, and really have stressed from the outset that there's not going to be a lot of, not that we're not going to support the students, but there's not going to be a parental figure or 24/7 kind of monitoring and watching of the students, that they're going to have to get up and get to class on time. We're not doing their laundry. They got to cook food. They got to figure all those things out. We don't really have a checklist along the lines of what you're asking, Iris. We do, probably the closest thing we have to that is in our initial application. When students and families apply for IES, we do have questions on there every year. We've tweaked them over time, but we do ask about their own living situation, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable is the student doing laundry, cooking, who do they live with at home? Have they shared a room? Just some of those sorts of things, just to get a sense of where the student may be at life-wise, experience-wise, and we will use that in conversation as we're interviewing and meeting with the students before we make our final decisions, but we don't really have anything else more involved or in depth than that.
Okay.
We found that we can learn a lot from asking, because we ask the students and the families to come do an actual physical on-campus tour as, kind of the final step in their application process. One, we want them to know exactly where we're located, what the island looks like, how the students can move around. And we want them to know how far away from home we are, because if they're exploring our residential opportunities, we're at least 3 hours away from home. And so when we are sitting and speaking with the students, we address them directly and we engage them on, what's your favorite thing to cook, and talk to them about some of those independent living skills. And we found that that's actually the best way to gauge how comfortable they will be in the dorms, because they can answer anything to us on a piece of paper, but when we actually speak to them about it, that's when we really get a true sense.
Yeah.
And we do.
So we're gonna.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying we do similar. We really we have an on-campus interview structure, tour, do a number of different things. And I agree with you. There can be a lot to be learned through going through that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Conversation is always good. Let's look at the key points that when people are setting up their housing program, we know that there are a couple of universities or programs that will be doing this with their program. What were some key points that you recommend that they consider when setting up the housing or residential piece of it?
I think from, where I see that is when you're speaking with families and students, really know what level of independence is going to be required to live in housing. And then once you establish that for your program, express with extreme clarity on those requirements and even walk through what a typical day looks like. We don't have classes Monday through Friday. And so we do try and add in some programming, some meetings and things like that. But, for us, and the biggest thing that we've learned is clarity. And then really thoroughly explaining the role of a mentor, because any student, at least in their first year of Project Access, will come into the residential setting with a mentor. And we have really learned that we need to be clear that, as Adam said, it's not a 24/7 service, it's not a babysitter, it's a peer. And in a lot of situations, we found that friendships develop and these really great relationships develop, but that's on the student side, and really getting the parents to understand how those things relate is paramount.
That's really well said, Katie. And I completely agree with you. The clarity, the definition, the I guess kind of what we do and do not offer, or what housing entails or does not entail. It's so important because parents have, I don't think maliciously tried to push the envelope, but well, can't you do this? Or, why can't this happen or whatever? So it's being very, very straightforward and upfront about that, and really setting the ground rules from the outset, I think is so important. And I think the other thing in terms of, as we've learned, I think you have to be prepared, again, depending on how you do it, even though we've done we've tried to, I don't want to say be completely hands off, because that's not the case. And it turns out it can't be the case, but it takes time to support the students on campus. We're finding that the basics of the laundry, the hygiene, the food, that kind of stuff, their students are generally fine with. And even if they go home every Saturday and take their laundry home, which is probably like 70% of every other college student on campus who does that too. So it's not that different, right? But so those basic kind of things haven't really ever been the issue. Where we've had a lot of challenges has been in the roommate realm. I want the temperature at 70. I want it at 68. I want to go to bed at 11 o'clock, but you stay up too late. I remember we had a student who, for whatever reason, every morning she wanted to get up at 5 in the morning and make herself an egg souffle before going off to class. And so, but she's banging and clanging pots and pans in the kitchen and waking people up. And so a lot of our issues and time has been spent on just dealing and managing those different roommate conflicts. And the students I don't think have been ready or prepared emotionally and just in different ways to navigate through those. And I don't think the parents have been prepared for those things either, to be honest, at least in our experience.
That's a good point. So what lessons have you learned in the initial establishment of housing options? You just went through a whole bunch.
Mm-hmm. I'll say something and Katie can go back. I think, and I mentioned earlier that in the first year, we had the students in one complex within the village where they were at. One of the things that we learned was that they were actually too close together, and the students would come to us and just say, oh, the drama level is so high today. It's all the drama, there's this, there's that. And so what we were finding is actually keeping the students in close proximity to one another actually created more opportunities for drama and just conflict, roommate disagreements, cliques, those sorts of things. And as we actually, at the time, we reached out to some other schools who were a little further along the road, and we were hearing some similar stories. So we then decided, and it did help quite a bit, we ended up moving all of the students we spread them out throughout the 3 complexes. So it was just a little bit more distance, maybe a little bit less likely to see each other in passing, and to try to curb some of that drama. And I've heard that again. I know I talked to, I think, the University of Cincinnati a while ago, and they said the same thing. Other schools have learned that. So That's a big thing. I also think there is, and we still haven't shifted away from having all of the roommates or having the students within IES live with non-degree or with degree-seeking students, so they still all live with students within IES. I really would like to get to an opportunity to have the students live with other UCF students. And I've heard on campuses where that does happen or where that model exists, that also further reduces the drama, and it gives the students within our programs an opportunity to have maybe a mentor or a role model within housing to kind of show them how to handle things. Whereas right now the students don't necessarily have that role model to help them kind of get above some of the conflict and the challenges that they're experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, I can echo that. You know, the inclusion is relatively easy when you have 100 beds in your dorms anyway, and that's where we're at. But it's so important because they also learn a lot of social skills that we're not necessarily able to teach. And we really like talking about soft skills, social skills, you know, this transition from home to CFK to beyond. And that is something really big to consider. You know, we do have to have the conversations about boundaries and, you know, cleaning up after yourself in the kitchen or the bathroom, or, you know, different levels of things like that. But, you know, one of the things that we've learned is that we just incorporate some of those conversations in our weekly, and in some cases twice weekly, meetings with the students, depending who they are. And we are in the process of changing our mentoring training, and that we feel will really help as well. And that's just, I think, from lessons learned and having students who are mentors prepared to step in if needed, and as needed.
Katie, and Adam, do you train your mentors, your peer mentors?
We do. We meet with them right now at the beginning of the semester, and what I talked about that we're developing is a more formal and comprehensive training that we've been talking about for a long time, but you know, where they can go back and refer to some resources and just, you know, utilize some of the softwares that we have on campus for the purposes of training. But currently we do, it's just more of a, this is how you do it, and this is what we've learned, and it's more conversational than formal. And we're at the point where we're ready for formal.
I'd echo the same thing. We're exactly informal, but we've talked about how to make it more formal. We've tried different models of come to campus a week before the semester starts. There's pros and cons to that. Yeah, but yes, we do training, and we know there's opportunity to do better in that way too.
So Adam, you mentioned earlier that you've had a decrease in your housing, but you've also mentioned that you are looking at how to be more inclusive with the housing, with non or degree seeking students. What strategies are you using to reassess and adapt your housing program opportunities?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think as housing is, well, as time has evolved, probably more than anything, I think a lot of different factors have come into play. For one, when we started, when IES started back in 2015, 2016, at the time, our demand from degree-seeking students for on-campus housing was just about equivalent to the supply of beds and space available. So it was, housing didn't really have a huge concern about having an IES presence within our housing environment. Since then, the demand greatly exceeds the supply of spaces available. And to further that, we have good data within the institution that shows that degree-seeking students who live on campus are more likely to be retained and graduate and whatnot. And we know how critical those types of metrics are relative to how our state works and state funding and whatnot. So there have been conversations around how many spaces do we really need, and that's probably played a little bit of a role in the reduction in the percentage that we've had. We also have had COVID impacts, pandemic, and I know other people are experiencing that as well. We've had change in leadership in housing, so those good relationships that I mentioned that were in play when I started, those folks have moved on, and so now it's about building new relationships with people who maybe don't understand IES as well as those who were there helping to get it launched in the beginning. So that has certainly impacted some things. So, and then just other things with around our staff and whatnot. But we've, you know, to answer your question, I mean, we're assessing it, but I think there's a lot more variables in play right now that it felt like it was easier to take on some of that stuff 5 years ago, and there's just a lot more that we have to consider right now. It's not as easy and cut and dry as it maybe felt like it was in the past.
What approaches are you using with the new staff that you're dealing with now to introduce them to the IES program?
We meet with them. We'll meet with them at the beginning of the year. We've chatted with them. We have good communication if issues pop up. The other thing is, though, because we for different reasons, we only have 3 students living on campus right now. The number of issues and the challenges have greatly reduced. The students who are living on campus are actually a pretty low maintenance crew, so we haven't had a lot of need to connect proactively or reactively, given where we are right now. But we know we're gonna have to do different if our numbers are gonna increase in the next year or so. But again, there's just a lot of other factors university-wide that'll go into making those final decisions.
Katie, do you have anything to add there?
I mean, just to echo kind of what we've said earlier about, and when we're adapting opportunities and changing, is really the transparency and just being very open about the opportunities and how the students will kind of move through the opportunity for living in the dorms. You know, just I cannot reiterate it enough. The transparency is so important, and it's different levels of transparency based on your individual institutions and your housing opportunities. I mean, for us, we don't have access to the dorms even by a key. And that's why we rely so heavily on our relationship with mentors, and then the mentors' relationship with the students, and then our relationship with the students to intervene on any potential issues that we may have.
Okay. All right. How, you know, thinking about decisions made when you deny or have to go back and say, you know, this housing opportunity for you is not working very well. How do you approach that with the students? Describe how decisions are made to deny a student the opportunity to participate in housing.
You know, in the years that I've been doing this with Project Access, haven't really experienced this. Everybody that has applied for the program and that is interested in housing has moved into Lagoon Landing. We have had a couple of situations where the students haven't been able to stay in housing for one reason or another, but we haven't had anything that has stood out enough to deny that part of the program. And really for us, we're a mix. So anybody who's living in our dorms is going to be from out of town. And so they're here on their own. And we do have some students who are here locally as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and for us, I don't think we've really denied anyone in that sense. We have to be upfront every year as we go through the application process. We'll tell families that we anticipate having 6 to 8 spaces in housing or whatever, but we anticipate enrolling or admitting 10 to 12. In the last few years, it's been admitting more students than spaces available. So then we're kind of figuring out, like Katie, we'll have a lot of people who apply from out of town. So if we're going to accept them, then obviously they would get housing because they need housing in order to come here versus somebody who maybe lives locally. But there's a lot that goes into that puzzle to try to figure that out. For a couple of students where it wasn't working in housing, it actually wasn't working just in general here. So they ended up leaving the institution, or we had to dismiss them from the program, but that was part housing, but part academics and other things as well too. We do have expectations with the students that they do have to, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, but I mean, they do have to abide by the UCF Code of Conduct, and if they were to They can go through the conduct process if they find themselves intertwined in a Title IX situation or a underage drinking situation or something where the normal sanctions in those cases would be probation from housing or suspension from housing or even removal from housing, but still staying at UCF and all those sorts of things. We do let the students know that they're subject to those same outcomes as well. They don't get a different level of consideration being a student within IES. So those are the types of things that would lead to probably a student also being, I guess, denied or not able to live in housing.
Okay. All right. And any strategies that you can give to share about, let me start all over, strategies to share about potential students and the families? How do you approach families and sharing information about housing opportunities?
Ours is embedded with our program, as an opportunity for the students. And so, it's right along there. And especially if they're from out of town, it's pretty easy for us to know who to talk about our residential opportunity with if they're not from Key West.
Yeah, we're, I think in terms of strategies, we, especially with prospective students and families, we definitely encourage the students if they're not already, and we encourage the parents to, start letting them do the laundry, help out with dinner more. I mean, those kind of things. What are the skills that you would need to be successful in this environment? And encourage families to create space for opportunities for those students to practice and do that. And I think just the more that they can get out and volunteer or do other things, interact with people, having to just be part of teams or whatever is really good. Because again, the soft skills, the relational skills have been really where we've seen a lot of frustration and challenges among the students. And so, but we prepare families for that we kind of will say that expect, it's not going to go smooth. I mean, we want it to go smooth, but expect obstacles along the way, expect some hiccups, expect your student to fall kind of thing. I mean, we'll talk about that because every student who's lived on campus has had an issue of some kind, whether it's been a conduct issue, whether it's been a significant roommate issue. I mean, most every student, something has come up that we can't really anticipate prior to, but then we have to be prepared to address as it unfolds.
And it sounds like neither of you have a housing policy that differs from your institution. Is that correct?
We don't.
Ours is the same.
You follow the same procedures.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any questions from our audience, from our participants in the?
I was saying, feel free to unmute yourself while I was muted. So just on the microphone button there, and you can unmute yourself if you have a question that you would like to ask either Adam or Katie.
This is Renee. I'm just looking to see, so it sounds like both of your housing components are really more just a supporting additional component of your existing program and not really a standalone independent living curriculum, if you will, to work on ADLs. Is that correct in my understanding of the way you guys have yours both operating at this point?
For us, yes. I mean, in the first semester, the students take an effective living course, an independent living course, and that will teach some things and talk about things that they may encounter living in the dorms, but we're not specifically doing any training or anything like that.
So then I guess this question might go to anybody, Drew, perhaps. Are there any programs currently, I guess in Florida specifically, of course, that are residential with like the goal of a, sort of a certification as far as completing the program? where it is really working to teach ADL skills. Do you know of anything like that that is in existence yet? Anybody?
And I don't know if Janice or Iris Drew know. I mean, I think the closest might be FIU, if nobody else on this. I know they're getting into some things, but
Who was that? I'm sorry.
Florida International University, FIU, might be the closest to that. Yeah, we haven't, we learned quickly how much we contemplated doing more of that along the lines of what you're saying, Renee. Man, I don't think we are, I don't know. When we talked about a lot of different things, we talked about a number of stuff, but we realized how much time just even the basics of housing was taking. And for us, we've been very limited in staffing. The budget's always been tight, right? As it is probably for most all of us on this. And as I've been telling, talk to Janice, you know, as we're kind of talking about even doing this conversation that, you know, the Florida Center, the way it's set up is really the primary focus in order to maintain our designation with them and to maintain the ability to get grants and scholarships is that the students have to graduate successfully and be employed in jobs after graduation, right? That's, I mean, the core mission of the Florida Center and why they offer the money they do to get students to that point of working. And so for us, we, as time has evolved, we've really shifted our resources to the employment development and employment readiness and not the housing readiness. And we felt like that was just the best approach given kind of the environment that we were operating within. So yeah, and I think, I know there's, I don't know about the University of Georgia. I know they do quite a few things with housing. That might be somebody else to look at, but it's a huge investment of time, and that's why we haven't done that right now on our end.
Renee,
and-
just to think of who it was, I was trying to think, but Southeastern University is looking at, not in the first year of their program, I think it's maybe, but in the second year or third year of their program, I think it's the second year of their program, where students may move off campus into an apartment that is nearby and do some of what the daily living skills and the independent living on their own type services with their program.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that's what I think we're looking to do. I'm with Soaring Eagle Academy with FGCU, and we're almost ready to implement phase one, which is just getting students actually into our program. But we do have a plan for phase two, which is the residential component, and we were actually looking for that to be a sort of hand-in-hand opportunity for the students that completed the employment program, that they could then elect to remain another year and be a part of the residential program, where they can really then practice more of those residential skills while really now working in the community in their jobs that they're doing, but perhaps now focusing more on those ADLs. Now that they have the job. So, and then with the intent of, obviously once more cohorts are together and both programs are operating, then it'll be a little bit more fluid as far as the opportunities for them to move back and forth into those programs, perhaps simultaneously, and enroll in both at the same time. So just looking for, but it's neat to hear, for me at least, a lot of the things that you guys have gone through and experienced just on the dorm level, because I think our vision involves, the students starting in the dorm. And I was quite interested to hear if anybody had any integrated, housing with the students and how that was going. So Adam, I'll be curious to see if that does get implemented with you guys and how that all works out.
We
Kelly, Drew, Kelly
sorry.
is on the Kelly Southmaid, it's from Southeastern, is on the call if she wanted to elaborate on what you said, Drew, about their housing program. Hey everyone, Kelly?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah.
Currently, we have 7 students that are residential, and they live right in the residence halls. We learned the hard way that when they were rooming together, link students with each other, there was a lot of problems because, again, they're functioning at a different social level. They're more like at the middle school age level, some of them. So it didn't work well. This year, we have switched to a 1-to-1 ratio with their residential mentor. So they are in 8-person suites, but there's not more than 2 link students in that suite. So it's a 2-to-6 ratio of traditional students and link students. And it's working out fabulously because there's so much more modeling of the typical students. And it's just really been a huge 100% turnaround. So what our proposal for changing for next year is to allow students that are successful in the dorms for that first year, and their residential mentor rates them weekly on a set of skills so that we can measure progress, look for opportunities that we need to intervene. And then, so if they were successful that first year, the second year they would have the opportunity to live in their houses that are owned by the university. They're kind of on the backside of campus, but they are more like a full house, and there's a full kitchen. Our residence halls do not have that. There's no kitchen supplies, just a bathroom and bedrooms and a living area. So then they would be responsible for planning for meals, shopping, cooking, just that higher level, getting closer to an apartment kind of concept. We still would have a residential mentor that would be in that house with them. And we're just looking at that. We've had a lot of parents that ask us that, how are they going to be able to ever, potentially live in an apartment with a roommate or with friends or something if they don't practice those skills. So that's kind of why we're wanting to change and add that option, just to make it a little bit more like a real life independent situation than a dorm, which isn't truly real life.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. We also have a question in the chat box from Christy. Do you pay the housing mentors?
Our residential mentors receive a scholarship each semester, and then we have an expectation of hours that they work with the students in project access or participate in programming with us, and anything beyond, which they do tend to go beyond, is the goodness of their heart, which we truly appreciate.
Okay.
Ours are given a stipend as well. We don't have a set number of hours, but they have to do those ratings, and we haven't had any concerns with them. They've all stepped up, and we keep in close communication with them, and anytime we know if something needs to be followed up on, we contact them. And it's a small enough group that there isn't a lot of yeah.
Okay.
And the funding for the mentors is, how do you guys, you guys have been around for a while, so I'm not sure where you are with your funding from sources.
It's funded through the grant at this point.
It is. Okay. Still funded. Okay, perfect.
Okay, and are residential mentors different than academic mentors? And do residential mentors receive free housing?
I wish ours received free housing, but they don't. And there is a differentiation of duties for our program between residential and academic mentors, even though our residential mentors will end up helping with homework or projects or things like that. That's not a main requirement of their position as a residential mentor.
Yeah, and we only have academic mentors. Yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, we have residential mentors, social mentors, which are just like a friend on campus that helps them integrate with the community and with doing things on campus. And then academic mentors. Right now, we're using the social work department has they have to get field work hours. So those students can participate with us and serve as an academic mentor. There's no cost to us because they're getting those field work hours. And it's been a really good partnership. And those students just, again, it's another program that's learning about our program, and it gets the word out. And I'm already getting applications for next year. And I haven't even started hiring for that yet, or even, you know, matching them up. But it's really been a way to spread the word on campus and open the eyes of those other students to the needs of students with differences.
There was another question. Actually, Michael asked a couple of questions. How many nights per week do the students stay on campus?
Ours are pretty much always here unless they go home for the weekend.
Same.
Same.
And Michael, I think the other question was answered about the residential. Okay. Mentors, how they paid. Okay.
Adam, did you have a comment earlier on the previous?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, I just want to give everybody any other questions that do you use a personality inventory to pair students? If so, which one do you?
We created our own. It's just an in-house. What are you interested in? And because we're so unique here in the Keys, we have students who come here to participate in our diving programs, marine science, culinary, hospitality. If we can, we pair people that have similar interests, just because they'll go snorkeling on the weekends off the beach, or they'll go to the beach, they'll, you know, go to the museum. So we just created one kind of really based specifically on our island and school culture.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Adam, sorry.
Yeah, we don't have anything formal. We probably just go back to we have some of those questions that I can mention on the application, but we really just base it on the on-campus tour and meeting and interview we have there, and just try to figure out who might be big personalities versus quieter personalities and try to assess that. Sometimes though, we don't even, it's a major puzzle trying to figure out also how to make the housing piece work too. So sometimes we don't even have any choice. It's just we have one suite left and these are the 4 females who have to live there, and that's it. So I mean, we don't necessarily have as many options as we would like at times for a number of different reasons.
We just basically through interviews and getting a sense for each student. And then actually some of them that knew the student from the previous year, they've requested each other too. We've had even the roommate, the residential mentors, you know, requesting that student be there and vice versa. So, because they make friendships on campus, and so that's really nice when that happens. That's what makes it easy. It's more of that's more of how it typically happens with traditional students, is to do that. You know, they request it a lot. So if especially for the second year, that's what happens a lot of times. The first year, we have to just make those decisions based on our interviews.
I wanted to share with you all that Katie put her Project Access, the questionnaire that they use, in the chat box. So if you aren't familiar with that, you know, go to the chat icon down at the bottom of the Zoom window, and then the chat box will open up over to your right, and you can just click on that document and it will download to your computer. And if anyone needs it, you can email me and I'll be happy to send it to you.
Additionally, we have Katie's brand new, hot off the press today, flip book about the Access program at CFK. And what's really neat about this, Katie was telling us that it is set up just like all the degree-seeking programs that they have on their college campus. So there is nothing different about the Access program from CFK.
Mm-hmm. Which we love.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds like both programs, or all 3 programs that have the housing, that it is set up typically just like housing would be for degree-seeking students. And Adam, like you said, sometimes there's not enough room, but you know, that's a natural thing that happens. If there's not enough spaces, then you don't get accepted to that. So that's just a natural consequence that everybody has to learn how to to, you know, work around. And I think it's great for our students to have that opportunity to problem solve around those issues. But I appreciate you guys sharing your wisdom today with everyone about the housing or residential component. If anyone else has other questions, please feel free to reach out to Katie and Adam and to Kelly in regards to this opportunity for students.
And as a reminder, the evaluation has been placed in the chat box. You will be receiving an email that provides you with a link, because we recorded today's webinar. And so we'll have a recording of the webinar that other team members that may want to watch this after you tell them what a great webinar this was, and it certainly was, that may want to view this webinar, and you'll receive a link to the evaluation also. Please complete that, because we do look at every evaluation to plan future events, future webinars, and try to make changes so that it meets your needs to the best of our abilities. Any other questions before we go? Again, thank you to our presenters, both Adam and Katie. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to share such great information. And we appreciate that. And we hope to see you again next month at our March informational webinar. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Good day.
All right.